The history of poetry stretches back to the Greeks, the Israelites, and other ancient cultures. And poetry is alive and well in the 21st century, thanks to young people who continue to use the ancient art to express themselves in new ways. To find out more, let's welcome Fred Sasaki, Associate Editor of Poetry Magazine. We also welcome poet Kate Manushka Airy, freshman at the University of Illinois in Urbana. I'd like to start with you, Fred, and ask you what your interpretation of the state of poetry in the 21st century is.
What I can tell you is that a lot of people are writing poems. Some people read them.
What are some of the forms of poetry you think are more tangible for youth today?
Well, you know, what's really fun is that a lot of people are, there's just so much experimentation and new ways of writing. For instance, and, you know, of course, even these things which are seemingly very new are already old hat. Like people do erasure work. Well, they'll take a source text, and it could be any book, and then they'll go through with, you know, a marker and black out words, so it'll sort of uncover some new work, some new poems. And people are using the internet to make poetry, and you know, this is something called flarf, which is you know, seen as sort of a stunt or a joke or a game. And it's about fun and kind of rolling around in words and, you know, taking what's out there and repurposing it and, you know, combining it. Like, for instance, people will take, enter in search terms onto Google, and then they'll take those results and pull them out and, you know, set them down on the page and rearrange them and reconfigure them, and you'll give hints to, like, your sources or maybe not. And I guess flarf in particular is interesting in that, so it's made with these with the computers and old text, and it's sort of a game, a banter back and forth between poets. They'll send it to each other, and I think part of the fun or game is to figuring out where did you get these words from, what are you getting at, what's happening, and it'll be a sort of back and forth. Another very interesting thing, which Poetry Magazine ran in the translation issue, I think it was last April, there are these short poems from Greece. And I guess a lot of the young Greek poets are composing their poems on cell phones, on SMS text message poems. And so they will also battle each other and send these things back and forth. And then when it's not digital, it's performative and combative, like in performance. So they'll walk into a room and they'll you know, they'll challenge each other to poems. And of course, you know, that's not necessarily common, but I think, you know, it's very fun to see the various ways. There's this one poet, Christian Book, who is somehow, and I'm a little unclear of how he's doing it, but he's implanting words, or I think poems, onto the DNA of some organism. And the idea being is that this is going to be a poem that's going to last for the rest of the world. And it will mutate and change, and I suppose recombine over the life of the organism. I'm unclear, but so there's lots of play.
Kate, what made you interested in poetry?
Initially, I would write all the time, but I never took it seriously. And I think the passing of my brother actually brought it out. Like, I didn't know how to express myself, so I started writing how I felt. And like, my teachers noticed that I was writing, and friends, and they looked at my work and they said, this is pretty good. And so they was like, you should keep at it. And years later, I kept writing and writing. And then now, like just last year, I started performing.
Who and what inspires you the most?
I would have to say my brother, because he was an artist and he used to paint pictures, and because I wasn't much of a painter, I would try to paint with my words and create pictures. And I'm also inspired by everyday life. People that I meet, the people I see, the actual encounters that I have myself. So I write about things that I experience and that people experience every day.
How has your Haitian heritage influenced your poetry?
My Haitian heritage has influenced my poetry a lot, because a lot of people don't know about the customs that I have, and they always ask me questions, so I can just put it in my spoken word and have them listen to whatever I'm saying.
So what generally do you write about then?
I typically try to write about things about empowerment, try to write positive pieces, and if I do write a sad piece, I try to bring out something positive about it.
Do you feel that you need to interpret your poetry, or do you let the audience interpret it for themselves? How do you feel about that?
You know, that's a great question because sometimes after I'm done writing a piece, I actually don't know what I meant by it, or like I feel like it can be interpreted different ways. So what I'm thinking at the time of writing it is sometimes different afterwards when I'm reading it back to myself. So it can be left up to interpretation.
Would you mind sharing one of your poems with us today?
The piece that I'll be reciting is titled Kisses on the Cheek. I was inspired to write this piece on an Easter Sunday after hearing the sermon about how Jesus was kissed as a sign of betrayal, and it reminded me how, and I tied into my own culture of how we kiss on the cheek. I used to think kisses on the cheek was love. I thought love was cheek kisses, but I never loved kisses on the cheek. It all began when I was a little girl. Haitian heritage, family went to pinch and kiss the baby. I smiled, because I thought that was love. Years later, I was taught to give my eldest cheek kisses, but it never came easy. I resisted and asked why. Said smart things like, I don't think she washed her face, so I'm not going to kiss her. So the roles began to reverse, and I received them. I never loved kisses on the cheek. In the Bible, when Jesus was kissed, it was a sign of betrayal, which is why I'm not shocked that those same family members don't support me. That's not love. Those were just phony cheek kisses. Phony like air kisses keep your friends closer and your enemies closer. That's why my enemies give me kisses and my friends stay distant. Just hugs and handshakes. In relationships, I don't like to kiss, so when he's begging to kiss my lips, I just say, no. So he kisses my forehead. I'm thinking in my head, that means he's a player. He's getting closer. Then he kisses my nose. I'm thinking in my head, he's expecting more. He's getting closer. So he stops right before my lips, inhales my exhales, looks at me in the eyes and says, I love you. The only thing I can say is, when you're near my lips, I get uneasy because you're only 3 inches away from betraying me.
That was powerful and moving.
Thank you very
How long
much.
did it take you to write that?
One day.
You brought up a lot of interesting points in there. What is your advice to the youth?
Basically, I would tell them to keep writing. No matter where you think you're at, you might think that it's too rhymey or something. Just keep writing. Write whatever you feel, because you never know who else may feel that way and how you might impact someone else. So just get out there, experience the world, and write about it.
Do you feel there's a link between reading and writing, do you think?
There's definitely a link between reading and writing, because through reading you learn a lot of things that you may have never came across before, or that you may have never known that someone else is experiencing. So I definitely think that through reading you learn a lot.
I know you spoke about this in one of your interviews also. How do you feel about encouraging our youth to also read in order to get better at expressing themselves?
Yeah, you know, and I wouldn't necessarily encourage young people to read in order to improve their own writing, but to sort of improve their lives and to maybe experience their lives more. Like taking off that whole notion of, you know, life imitates art, you know, engage yourself with books and art, and you see it everywhere, in every bit of your life, and things will open up for you in really nice ways.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Fred and Kate, for being with us today. I'm Tamara Love. For Different Drummers, keep the faith.